Hello, Josh Cohen.
Glenn Loury. It's good to be back with you. It's been a while.
It has been a while, my friend. I'm Glenn Loury. We are at the Glenn Show at bloggingheads.tv, and I teach at Brown University. Josh?
Well, first of all, I'm really happy to be on the Glenn Show. This is my first appearance that we've been on Blogging Heads many times. I'm Josh Cohen. I teach at Stanford in political science, philosophy, and law, and I am editor of Boston Review. I'm actually also on leave from Stanford, and I work at Apple. But that's not germane to our conversation, but I feel that I should mention that.
Well, no, I feel like I want to know what you do at Apple, Josh, my old friend, who introduced me to Blogging Heads years ago.
Yeah. Well, you know how we are at Apple. We don't talk about what we do. I'm on the faculty of Apple University.
Okay, but wait a minute now. You're a political philosopher, right?
Right.
Okay, so How is it that you can be doing something that at Apple that you can't talk about? I mean, is it really that deep over there?
It's not one of the subjects that I've prepared for today.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
So
anyway, happy Father's Day, by the way.
Oh, thank you, Josh.
Yeah.
I much appreciate that. And happy Father's Day to you if it applies or in any case.
Yeah, it does. It does. I have two kids, and I'll see them for dinner tonight. Yeah, 22 and 26. Yeah. So
fabulous. You're welcome. So we're talking about politics today, I guess. The president's come out with a new administrative move on the immigration front.
Right.
And then there's the immigration issue more broadly. And then we're also going to talk, I think, a little bit about this work that you're doing in Nairobi, Kenya, and how it relates to general issues of, what we do about poverty and our own activism at home and abroad and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
So why don't you get us started?
Immigration. The president made a statement on Friday, changed policy. My short response is that he did the right thing. What do you think?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't know how you're going to be against this. I guess the anti-immigration Tea Party types will find a way.
Yeah.
They'll say that it's the slippery slope to amnesty.
Right.
But I find it quite a compelling argument and such a tragic thing to contemplate. The argument that's compelling is, look, people have come through no fault of their own. Their parents made a decision. They've kept their noses clean. They have something to contribute. They're here. This is the only country they know. We're going to drop them in the middle of a foreign land because they don't have, as it were, clean papers through no fault of their own. That seems like not such a sweet thing to be doing. And then to contemplate someone who doesn't speak, I don't know what, Spanish or Farsi or whatever it might be. Of course, it's mostly Spanish, but being, deported from their country. They went to school here, they were born here, So, I don't know, this one seems hard to argue against.
Yeah.
Plus, it looks like smart politics, Josh. It looks like smart politics.
I agree. And, if the way our political conversation goes, if you say it's the right thing, then you're somehow missing the fact that it was just done for political reasons. And, Obama, unfortunately, has an ability to save doing the right thing, to keep it in his back pocket, as with the gay marriage issue, until it seems transparently a political ploy to do it, and then he does the right thing, and you distract attention from the right thing by getting into a discussion about the political motives. I don't doubt that there were political motives, but I don't think motives make a difference to whether it was the right thing or not, and I think you've identified the compelling argument in favor of it. The things that I've seen said against it are the first is, and I don't really understand this, that this is a reward for illegal behavior. I don't understand that because, you're talking about kids who came here and they weren't that they were engaged in illegal behavior by coming here. It just seems a little silly, or that you're rewarding their illegal behavior when they came when they were, maybe 4 or 6 years old and came with their some members of their family. There is also this point about how that some people have made that this is taking, you got a lot of unemployment, horrible unemployment in the country now, and that what you're doing is taking jobs away from Americans. And that strikes me as a pretty cynical point, because, and really question begging, because I think the point, if I had to summarize your compelling version of the compelling argument, the point is the people who this covers are Americans in any relevant sense of the term. So you're not taking away jobs from Americans and giving them to somebody else. You're recognizing that a group of people who have been, to some extent, living in the shadows are Americans. And there are lots of ways of dealing with the unemployment issue without, doing it on the backs of the people who this policy covers. I guess the thing about the politics of it is, I think, it seems clear that there are political motives for it to, increase enthusiasm among Hispanics for voting for Obama. But I think what I'm impressed by is that the opposition to doing this for the past 11 years, and in particular the opposition to doing it for the past 2 years, when the DREAM Act came back in 2010, I think that that's what's really badly politically motivated. And I think the recent opposition to doing anything on the DREAM Act comes from the thought that if Obama is in favor of it, that's a good enough reason for opposing it.
Okay, hold on, Josh. Let me get in here for a minute, because I want to not lose track of all the different things you're putting on the table. So opportunism, political opportunism, and I had a couple of thoughts. One is, one reason that the president saves doing the right thing until political exigency compels him to do the right thing is because prior to that point, political exigency may have inhibited him from doing the right thing. And it says something about the state of his own political fortune that, that the strategy has shifted. So here's what I mean. Whereas before, we're all in this thing together. It's one America. We're not going to cobble together a coalition of various factions of special interest, where we're going to appeal to the better angels of our nature, so to speak. That's kind of the 2008, music, and it didn't work, unfortunately.
It didn't work.
Unfortunately, okay?
It didn't work.
And we can blame the Republicans or the country or whoever we want to blame, but the point is it didn't work. So now we're back to a politics of the Democratic Party is an agglomeration of a various set of interests, labor, minorities, whatever. And we're going to need to appeal to them. So whereas before you stay away from gay marriage and you stay away from liberal policy on immigration because you don't want to alienate some kind of mythic middle that's out there and you want to kind of be cautious, now you see that hasn't worked and you're pretty much, driven to this old formula. And I don't mean to disparage it in observing this, but I do think that that's an accurate characterization of where we are.
Yeah. Yes, I didn't think you were disparaging it. I think that strikes me as quite right. The one thing that I'd want to maybe disagree with you on, although I'm not sure it's a disagreement, is the issue of who bears responsibility for the failure of the we're all in this together, let's, as we say politically, reach across the aisle, try not to be so partisan. We all bear some responsibility for it, but I really think that the principal responsibility lies at the door of the Republican Party and activists in the Republican Party. And I say that I'm strengthened in that conviction by the recent book by Tom Mann and Norm Ornstein.
I've not seen it.
Title. Yeah, title. You know, these are.
I know who they are. Yeah.
Mainstream of the mainstream commentators on Congress, and have been at it for a long time. And one of their big conclusions in this book, it's called something like, things are worse than they seem, or something like that. One of the big conclusions is that the responsibility for this really is asymmetric, and begins with Gingrich's time in Congress, which he turned into a hyper-partisan institution, and they make the case, in particular, that things have reached a point where Obama's being in favor of something is good enough reason for opposing it. So people who were in favor of DREAM Act-like legislation have opposed the DREAM Act. People like McCain, who've had sensible views on immigration in the past, have moved away from those views. And so I do think that the responsibility should be located where it belongs, and I do think that that's what.
Okay, and I don't disagree with that. I mean, we can clearly see the Republican strategy. They don't want the president to succeed, and they don't want to give him any leeway, and they, as you say, are against anything in virtue of the fact that he's for it. But to that, there is this response, which I offer up for the sake of our discussion, which is precisely, that's the nature of the circumstance, and that's the nature of the job. Okay? It is a tough world out there, and it's gotten tougher in the last 30 years, but that we knew going in was the nature of the job. So are you up to the job? Okay? It's not an argument to say the job is difficult when you're failing. I failed because the job is difficult. That's the nature of the job. It's going to be the nature of the job if there's a President Romney. It was the nature of the job when there was a President George W. Bush. So granted, it's a tough environment to get anything done in, but you're the president.
Right. So I agree with you about that, and I have, and there's a, mea culpa on my side here. When we talked about these issues about, Obama's political style and this kind of efforts at a sort of post-partisanship in the 2008 campaign, in contrast with Hillary Clinton's view that, she understood the shitstorm that she would get if she were elected, or that any Democrat would get if elected, and that she was prepared for it, and that Obama was not prepared for it. And I was, I think insufficiently appreciative of the truth in what Hillary Clinton was saying. I thought that, past is past on the details, but I was wrong about that. And I think it's been a problem with Obama's term in office that it was obvious within about maybe 3 minutes, but certainly within 3 or 4 months of his presidency, that he needed a backup. He needed a plan B, because plan A of reaching across the aisle and blah 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 bipartisanship, post-partisanship, whatever, was not going anywhere. But he didn't have a backup plan. Didn't have now in the midst of the election, he's sort of gotten one, though by halting steps. So I think it's a real deficiency of his political style and of his presidency.
Let me put something else on the table here, Josh, as we're talking about this political opportunism and the president's situation.
Yeah.
And that is that I was at dinner recently with someone whose name I don't want to mention. They are a prominent person in the Democratic political world and in academia, and have sat on the board of major financial corporations. Okay, so this is a player, and very sympathetic to the president. And the report that I got was in this conversation that not only were the monies drying up on Wall Street of the financial titans and their various contributions, and the president is lagging behind. This is in the newspapers; everybody knows it. But not only that, but that up and down the street, they hate his guts. That he's got enemy after enemy after enemy of people who otherwise you might think would be hedging their bets or would be just sort of supportive of the Democratic Party, but they want this president defeated. And I'm just, the thought that I had when I heard this, it is a little bit of gossip, but I think it carried some weight with me anyway. The thought that I had was, well, gee, if you're going to end up at the end of the day with the Titans of Wall Street hating your guts, then, you might as well have, screwed them
to deserve it
in the first place.
You might as well have done something to deserve it.
Done something, exactly. That's it. That's exactly. You might as well have done something to deserve it. If it's going to be a one-term proposition, God damn it, then go down swinging for the right things. So you're saying he's driven to do the right thing by political exigency, and I'm thinking, well, maybe sometimes just the opposite should be the case. You should do the right thing despite its political ineptness, because if they're going to hate you at the end of the day anyway, you might as well go down.
Yeah, I agree. I agree about that. But what were the reasons that in this conversation? What were the reasons? Because I think for if you're a reader of Paul Krugman and kind of political commentary, liberal, progressive, left. It's all about how Obama has, sold out to Wall Street, and or Cornell West, for that matter.
Right.
He's, sold out to the oligarchs, and when you look at the people who've been in his administration and close ties to Wall Street, there, Geithner and others, So what's the source of the hatred for him?
So what my highly placed friend reported was that they resent that he took their money in 2008 and then turned around and demagogued them and made cheap political points at their expense about executive compensation and about their responsibility for the financial collapse and so forth and so on. Now, from my point of view, and from Cornell West's point of view, for that matter, the president didn't make nearly enough, take nearly enough shots at these bankers, and they got to walk away with way too much of my money at the end of this process. Yeah. But for them,
so basically,
they're.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I'm just telling you this is all, hearsay. Yeah. So I'm just basically reporting what I was told, which was that they feel there was a bait and switch that went on. They thought he was one of them. They thought that they were all on the same team, and it turned out that he was willing to throw them under the bus, and so they resented, and they're going to get their revenge.
Well, I think there are probably two things. This is my guess: is that there are two things. One is, this sounds like completely pathetic whining to me. I mean, you want to talk about you're in the game, you're big boys, so you get it, you take a little heat because, you were involved in a bunch of activities that almost crushed the economy. So, it seems like pathetic whining to me. But I think that they're probably also, the second piece, though, is that they're probably making a bet. They think that they can, they feel a little bad because he's criticized them some. And they're not worried, though, that they better keep playing with him because he might do something really bad to them. They're not worried about that, so they can pull the money away without thinking that there's any sanction.
I hear you. Okay, I got to tell this anecdote.
More severe than a hand.
I got to tell this anecdote. Okay, so this is Oliver Stone's movie Nixon. Okay. Yeah. Now, it's not a great film in my humble opinion, although I'm not a critic. But there's a magnificent scene in this film where Nixon is down in Texas. And he and Haldeman are meeting with these money guys, okay? These are probably the guys that killed Kennedy, quote unquote. Don't quote me saying that, but it's that. You get that feel. It's a smoky room. Everything is oily. You feel bad just watching it in the movie theater, okay? These are rich people. They're used to getting their way, and they're talking to Richard Nixon, and they're complaining about a federal judge ordering niggers to be busted across, their kids to be busted across town to go to school with niggers. And they're complaining about the IRS on them, and they're complaining about this, and they're complaining about that, okay? And Nixon is just listening to it. And they're basically saying, we gave you our money, now we expect you to do something. Whose country is it anyway? This is what they're saying to Richard Nixon. Yeah. So Nixon listens and he listens and he listens, and they're ranting, and there's one guy in particular who's ranting, and then he turns to the guy and he says, you know, you're complaining about the Environmental Protection Agency? You want me to send the IRS your way? Okay? And then the guy says, you threatening me? And then Nixon says, presidents don't threaten. They don't need to.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah,
so it's like, you better be afraid of me.
Yeah.
Okay? You better, because I'm president of the United States. You better be afraid of me.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody's afraid of it.
Right. So I always hesitate about applauding Richard Nixon, but no, that's exactly what I have in mind is they can afford to whine about this stuff, and it is pathetic, childish crap. But they're not. I don't think they're worried that the whining is going to cost them anything.
Right.
And that goes back to this issue about Obama's political style, and the whining costing them anything doesn't have to mean that he's going to send the IRS after them. The whining them costing them something is that Obama could have from month 3 could have tried to run a more populist presidency. Could have tried to mobilize people, and there was a lot of hostility, as to say the least, against the people who were whining, and a hostility against Obama because he had them in his administration, and not just Cornel West hostility, but Tea Party hostility. So there are a lot of people out there who were pissed off, but Obama didn't really get the message on that. So yeah, I think. No, I think this is
This is a major theme, I think, Josh. I mean, so you have the meltdown of 2008. You have the necessity of some kind of major move to stabilize and, quote, bail out and underwrite so that we don't go down a rat hole in terms of financial collapse and economic collapse. You have that, so that's a fact. That's on the table. Now, ugly stuff has to be done, including hundreds of billions of dollars of effective transfers from Main Street to Wall Street. It has to be done. I mean, I'm of the view that it has to be done. So now this is a very special...
I agree with you.
Okay. So this is a very special political moment. And coming out of it, somehow the populist, energies that are latent in that moment are going to be mobilized one way or the other. Now you have a kind of centrist Democrat establishmentarian president who has the potential to take it in a left direction. And you also have this Tea Party thing, which is the fruit of, 30 years of grassroots conservative consolidation and whatnot, which is also populist at its core. And it's the second party that ends up making the political hay out of the moment. Okay? It becomes fodder for reactionary sentiments within the polity instead of it becoming fodder for an institutionalized progressive sentiment in the polity. And I'm sorry, but I have to fault the President of the United States for that.
Yeah, I don't have to apologize to me for that. I agree. I mean, I think maybe we've talked about this before, and I don't want to, minimize the force of what you're saying by crystallizing it in a small point. But let me crystallize it in a small point. There's a very simple thing that that Obama could have done, never did, and it's sort of shocking that he never did it, which is to make the great speech about the state of the economy and how we got into the mess that we're in. It's obviously a really serious mess with so many people unemployed. It's horrible. Yeah. And you get up and you do what Ronald Reagan would have done. And you can it can be analytical and it can be political. You can say we got into this mess because of, as is being said now, we got into this, as Obama said recently, if you like the last decade, vote for Romney. And you say, that here's how we got into this situation. And here's why it's going to take a long time to get out of it. And here's what we're going to do to get out of it. And you give it, the odd, never done that. And now, turning the hostility to Wall Street into, a real political force, progressive political force, would have required obviously a lot more than doing that. But, the thing that I find shocking about Obama's performance is the unwillingness even to take that first step. And because he's been so unwilling to take even that first step, that's why I think that the kind of complaining that you were hearing from your dinner companion is pathetic whining. Because what are they whining about? Anyway, so.
Okay, Josh, let's move on to, you're going to talk a little bit about what you're doing in Nairobi, and the interesting question is why we go to the other side of the world to mount initiatives that we might also be mounting at home, or something like that, but it's your show. What do you want to say about that?
Right, yeah. So for the past 3 years, I've been co-teaching a course at Stanford in the design school, the D School. There was just actually an article about the D School about a week and a half ago, June 7th, in the Wall Street Journal. It was kind of, never mind B School, go to D School. And the background for the course is, I've been out in teaching at Stanford in Silicon Valley for, 6 years now. And one of the things that's notable is that there's a very high degree, as you could imagine, of a kind of, techno-enthusiasm, techno-utopianism. And one crystallization of that is the kind of mobile for development idea. Mobile phones are the, the cure-all for all of the world's problems. And so there's a lot of that around, and my initial reaction to the mobile for development idea was a kind of, this is ridiculous, But then I thought, actually, there are a number of problems in the world where you could make some headway, because of the the kind of ubiquity of, it's part of mobile phones being part of the vernacular in lots of places now. But I thought you needed a way to discipline the enthusiasm and to discipline the project. So I joined up with a colleague, Terry Winograd, in computer science, and we teach a course at the D School where the D School teaches design thinking, and design thinking is an approach to problem solving. It's human-centered design, and one of the core ideas is that when you're trying to address a problem, you start off with a kind of deep engagement with the people you're designing for. So it's kind of like ethnography before you
that sounds
start
very,
to try
very
to solve
cool,
a problem.
man. Very cool.
Well, I've got the.
Yeah.
It's cool. The issue is, but you've got the right word. It's cool. The issue for me is it effective? So that is, does it actually make, So we've been teaching this course, and we collaborate with the project teams. These are mostly graduate students. They form into project teams in the course, and they do these projects in collaboration with Kenyan NGOs. And the NGOs all work in these informal settlements in Nairobi, including Kibera, population somewhere between 200,000 and 500,000 in an area that's three-quarters the size of Central or Matare, which is another,
A quarter million people living in 3/4 of Central Park.
Yes, and most people, as you could imagine, about 80% of the population lives under the Kenyan poverty line. Generally, they've got a basic education, and there's a lot of commercial activity. So it's not like everybody's walking around hanging their heads. And
I understood.
What to do. There's a lot of energy there, but so we work with these organizations, and the students develop. So let me give you an example of a project that we've got going now.
Okay.
Most people, say 85% of people who live in Kibera, have no running water either inside their house or outside. So they have to go and buy water every day. And you go buy water by carrying a 20-liter, jerry can, and you pay much more than you pay in central Nairobi for water. But a lot of the time, there are water shortages, and when there's a water shortage, you spend 2.5 hours looking for water, and you pay 3 to 6 times the usual price. So the idea of this project, it's called Maji, which means mobile water, was you set up a server that enables water vendors to dial in and indicate where they've got water and at what price and when it was last and what method of cleaning the water they've got. And then buyers call into the same server and they can find out where the closest water is, where the closest clean water is, at what price, and then they can complain if they get there and the price is different from what was advertised, or there wasn't water there, or it wasn't cleaned in the right way.
I hope you have economists. I hope you have economists as a part of this team that's involved in this project.
Well, we're doing it as a field experiment,
Okay.
and we've got medical people. We've been consulting with an economist.
But let me just tell you why I say that, just very briefly, Josh, because I know you're in the middle of your story, which is that a market here, where there are quality differences and where information is important. You're talking, if it's 3/4 of Central Park, the geography is relatively compact. Competition will work differently when the buyers have all this information than it's going to work when they don't have it.
Right.
It's just a beautiful, natural setting in which to study how markets work, what difference information makes, how efficient pricing, and, et cetera. So that's why I say it, because it sounds like it's a beautiful opportunity for studying something really important about markets and human behavior.
Right. So that's we want to see if prices come down, if the law of one price sets in, and we also want to see if there are, and we want to see what happens with health effects. That's the the
ultimate
the ultimate thing here. So we have actually been consulting with economists about how to design the experiment and how to and it all came out of the use of this classic paper by Jensen, UCLA, on mobile phones, and it's the one thing that you can be pretty sure that mobile phones are good for is reducing search costs.
Let me tell you a story right quick. I'm just going to tell the story very quickly. I'm in Bogota, Colombia, teaching during the summer down there a couple of years ago. A cab pulls up in the middle of downtown on a busy street as I'm having lunch with companions and trying to get back to my office. My Colombian associate pulls out a cell phone, texts to a given number the cab license plate, and gets an immediate response saying that it's okay to get into the taxi. And so we get into the taxi without fear that we're going to be kidnapped.
Pretty good.
True story. Yeah, I think
amazing.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. No, that's we have a public safety project going that had some real troubles in its first iteration, but we've got a bunch of these projects going. In the water market one, we actually had a launch of this project in Kibera in late March, and there were about 1,000 people there, and Nairobi generally is a very, very exciting place for innovation and information technology now.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, there's, Nairobi in particular, but Kenya generally, you've got this system M-Pesa, this, mobile money transfer system, which is really the most advanced system of its kind in the world. You've got in 5 years, you've got 70% of the population using the system, including large numbers of people who are otherwise unbanked and who live under the Kenyan poverty line. So it's really, an amazing and exciting place, and the work is exciting and interesting. But here's a challenge that I feel about it, which is, it's why Nairobi? And I can go through the details of how we ended up in Nairobi and why we've stayed there. But people say, well, why are you doing this in Nairobi and not in? Somebody said, why Nairobi, not Newark, or why Nairobi and not East Oakland? Mm-hmm. And I think it's a pretty serious challenge. And here's why I think it's a serious challenge, and it goes back to some of the issues that we've talked about the kind of parlous state of American politics. The students we get who come to this course are fantastic, and some of them are international students, but a large number of them are students from the United States, and it's there are lots of courses like this that are getting students involved in global health projects or other kinds of global development projects. And so what's happening is that large numbers of extremely talented, passionate, motivated, energetic, morally serious students who might otherwise be doing stuff in the United States are going off and doing stuff in other parts of the world. And look, that's in a way that's not only fine but really good, because there are big problems in other parts of the world, and a lot of urgency, and people dying of cholera, and malaria, and so it's a good thing to do. But what concerns me, concern that I think about as I am involved in this work, is that lots of talent, and as I say, serious and morally motivated talent that could be working on problems domestically, is directing kids or directing their attention elsewhere. And is that part of why the quality of American political life is so bad? Is it, maybe it's not 50% of the reason, it's not 10% of the reason, but is it even 1% of the reason? Anyway, it concerns me about this. I don't know if you, what's your...
Well, let me say a few things here. I'm listening to you. And what I'm thinking about is the fact that next week I have to go lecture at Brown. Well, I guess it's this week. It's just day after tomorrow, to a group of scholars from what they call the Global South. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's developing countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. It's a wonderful program that brings 150 scholars from around the world to Brown's campus for a 2-week intensive summer institute on various, analytics of the study of economic development and, environmental issues and cultural and political, so it's a wonderful thing. Yeah. So I have to give this lecture, but I'm supposed to talk about the United States. That's the charge that I've been given. Yeah. Because we want the students or the participants who are coming, many of them are mature scholars, from these countries like Kenya and Nigeria and Ghana, but and so on. We want them to know that the social inequality problems are very much present in the advanced and wealthy countries, right, and that we haven't got all these issues sorted out. So, I'm going to be the guy who focuses on domestic American inequality to come in to talk to these students who are mainly concerned about international development inequality.
Right, right.
And I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking, and I know what you mean. I mean, because we have our graduate students in economics, those who are working on development issues, who go off to all manner of, society around the world, and they live in these villages, and they gather data, and they do their dissertations, and, so on and so forth. And we don't have nearly as much, I must say. I'm talking about my own department, but I think it's probably true more broadly, of engagement in that kind of field work and intensive ethnographic and living and, gathering the data and doing the dissertation with respect to communities that are right here at hand, but that still are living outside the orbit of opportunity and, the structures of social mobility and upward mobility in America. Yeah. And I'm not blaming anybody for this. I think it can be easier to get on an airplane and fly to the other side of the world sometimes.
Yes.
that it can be to deal with all of the, profound difficulties of relationship and solidarity and whatnot within our own society.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I understand exactly why it is, and it is troubling, but I just want to affirm in my own experience what it is that you're saying. I think there is a real issue here.
Yeah, and I can make the case for working in Nairobi. I mean, the issues are very urgent, and there are these organizations, and they need assistance. And we are talking about really basic stuff like, access to water.
Yeah.
Even water, never mind clean water, just access to water, period, and access to clean water in particular. And
yeah.
But there are, if not there are pretty comparably urgent issues here, but I think there's something that you said that really resonates, and it would be a good topic to talk about sometime, which is that lots of people find it easier, less uncomfortable, less disturbing to get on a plane and I don't want to minimize this. I mean, I've got a guy who's working on the water project. He's in Nairobi now, and the only reason that this project has gotten as far as it's gotten is that he's spent a lot of time in Nairobi over the past, year and a half. So it's not easy work to do. But we're not talking about. I think your point was not how much time it takes, or how much energy it takes, or how much money it takes, but a sense that it's easier in the sense of more comfortable. It's not quite as challenging to get on the plane and go to Nairobi and work in Kibera or in Mathare, as challenging as that could be, as it is to deal with very extreme kinds of social exclusion that are.
Let me advance a hypothesis here.
Yeah.
Which is that when you parachute in from outside of a society, there's no way that you have responsibility for the structures, the institutions, the history that have created the conditions in which you're trying to work and improve people's lives. It's not about you. You've come in from the moon. You've flown in from another planet. Okay? When you walk across the street, I mean, let's just think about it. East Oakland is what? It's a stone's throw from where you are right now.
Yeah.
Okay? All of the divisions between the high-end, wealthy suburban districts south of San Francisco, going down in the Silicon Valley, on the one hand, and these pockets of despair, poverty, alienation, and hopelessness that are laying cheek by jowl with us, they're like nothing. These school districts that we construct, where we draw a line in the municipal geography and we say we're going to have good schools on this side of the line where the professionals live, and we're going to have horrid schools on the other side of the line where the food stamp recipients live. This is all happening right here at home. There's no way you can walk across the line and not be culpable.
That's a great...
You're looking in the face of people whose condition is partly the consequence of your own political inactivity. So that's what I think is at least part of the story here.
I hadn't thought of it quite that way before, but it resonates. I mean, there are students who are in our courses who have done some of that kind of thing, but I think it's right, and there's something maybe also if you go to a place that's far away, you don't really know that much about it. It's not only that you don't feel culpable, but there's an easy way to romanticize the situation, and there's an easy way to think that it's much easier, to think that small changes are going to make large differences than when you're working, closer to home and you think so much more about the depth of the challenges, that the idea that a small intervention is really going to unlock opportunities, et cetera, maybe is a harder idea to sustain. But speaking of Silicon Valley and fancy communities. Today is Stanford graduation, and I've got to be there.
Okay, you got to
go and be there. So very good
All
to
right,
talk,
my
and we
friend.
want to continue this conversation.
My pleasure.
Thanks.
Indeed, we do.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.